The Force is living energy surrounding and binding all living things that exist in the Star Wars universe. Many are aware of the Force-sensitive mortals of the Jedi, Dark Jedi, and the Sith. However, there exists another set of beings which some consider to be Force deities. These beings are the ones of Martynas. But what if I told you that there is a Force being that is darker than the dark side itself, more cruel than any Sith? A being so powerful and so evil that at the peak of his power, Luke Skywalker described her as beyond human comprehension. Welcome, weary travelers of the galaxy. In today's video, we will be discussing the bringer of chaos, Abeloth, in an updated cohesive video concerning her origins, abilities, and what makes her one of the most powerful entities in all of the Star Wars mythos. To begin this story, we start on a distant and unnamed jungle planet over 100,000 years before the Battle of Yavin for those unaware. The Ones are a race of 3 Force gods, for lack of a better term. There was the father, who looked after his children, the son, who represented the dark side, and the daughter, who represented the light. Forever at war, the two children decimated their home planet. At the time, there was a mortal woman who served the Ones. We do not know her name. We only know her as the Servant. The Servant cared for the Ones and spent her years looking after them. She genuinely loved them, and they grew to love her as well, as far as making her a member of the family and referring to her as the mother. The mother continued to care for the family for decades, potentially centuries, as she mediated between the children, finding balance to stop their infighting and feuding. She put them to work fixing their home planet by perfectly utilizing the sun's destructive nature to hollow out some tunnels and caves in the mountains, and making sure they worked together to rebuild what they had destroyed. This was an era of peace for the family. But one thing was becoming more and more apparent as time went on. The mother wasn't like the rest of her family. They were immortal beings, and she was growing older with time. As a result of this, the mother was slowly losing her grip on the children, and unable to mediate them as effectively as before. Fearing for the sake of her beloved family, she sought out the 2 Force nexuses present on the planet. First, she drank from the Font of Power, a Force nexus of the dark side that was said to grant limitless and undying power of the past and the future. This was in fact the same well that the sun had once drank from. She then bathed in the Pool of Knowledge, a Force nexus which was said to grant all knowledge of the past as well as the future itself, all the mysteries of the galaxy. Again, the same pool that the daughter had once bathed in to gain her power. Tragically, the mother was reminded that she was not like the Ones in the worst way possible. Due to her mortality, the Force nexuses mutated her and warped her mind. She did become as the Ones were, but she was a monster with power that rivaled even the might of the father. The twisted mother returned to the surface to stop the children's war. This time, however, she overpowered them by sheer strength alone and forced them into submission, making these 2 so-called gods bow before her. Appalled by this, the father swept his children away and abandoned the mother, now known as Abeloth, on the planet. Now alone and unloved, Abeloth's worst fear had come to pass by her own doing, and she went insane with her new power. An insane power that was a danger to the Ones as well as the entire galaxy at large. Because of this, the son and daughter went to enlist the help of the insectoid species called the Killik on Alderaan. By imbuing them with Force powers, the children used them as workers to create 2 massive artifacts. Once completed, these artifacts were called the Centerpoint Station and the Sinkhole Station. These technological titans were used to trap Abeloth in a place called the Maw. However, even this could not hold Abeloth's insane power permanently. According to the legend of the Killik, Abeloth was able to escape the Maw every time the current of the Force changed or was imbalanced. When this occurred, wars and chaos would break out amongst the galaxy from simply her mere presence. The Ones and the Killik would return and defeat her and banish her to the Maw yet again every time she managed to break free. Unable to kill the entity. This cycle continued until the demise of the Ones in 21 BBY, when Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Ahsoka Tano located them on Martynas. Abeloth, however, existed beyond shadows, a realm that was an exact copy of the jungle planet that she and her family had once inhabited peacefully. Force sensitives could access this realm by separating their mind and body. In fact, there was a clan of people called the Mindwalkers that lived in the Sinkhole Station that did this very often. Abeloth, desperate for contact with anyone, would reach out and influence the minds of any Force sensitives that entered the Maw, making them her eternal worshippers. After the Yuzhong-Vong War, there were many Jedi Knights that had taken shelter in the Maw. Abeloth took advantage of this and began to influence their minds, causing them to believe that everyone except for their fellow delusional friends had been replaced by an imposter. During this, she had also sent a message through the Force to beckon a new tribe of Sith to come to her planet within the Maw. Meanwhile, Grandmaster Luke Skywalker and his son Ben were retracing the steps of a journey of the newly turned Sith Lord Jacen Solo. Unknown that Abeloth was creating her grand plan to escape indefinitely from the Maw. When Luke and his son came across the Mindwalkers, they learned how to journey beyond shadows, where they saw a woman in the mist. She beckoned the Skywalkers to speak with her, yet they refused, sensing something strange about the entity. Back on her planet, the Sith ship fully in her control, Abeloth brought them to the planet and disguised herself as a refugee to befriend the strike team. While distracting them, she sabotaged their ship and attacked the Sith with all of the plants and flora on her planet. The strike leader, Lady Olaris Rey, survived with the help of her apprentice, and was able to see Abeloth for what she truly was. No longer a refugee, but a woman with pale skin, sunken black eyes, a mouth that stretched ear to ear filled with jagged teeth, and short arms with long writhing tentacles instead of fingers. An uneasy alliance began between Luke and the Sith as they went to destroy their mutual enemy, this entity within the Force that none of them could comprehend. To summarize, a good portion of the 9-part book series that this takes place in is a cat and mouse chase between the Jedi and Abeloth, which ends as she makes a pact with the Sith and begins to rise to power on Coruscant. She disguises herself as a senator and infiltrates the Galactic Senate itself. Through more death, manipulation, and subterfuge, Abeloth ruled over Coruscant as she abducted Versta Kai and Ben Skywalker in hopes to morph them into effectively create her ideal family, only wanting the family that she once had. Luke Skywalker and the legendary Sith Lord Darth Krayt faced her down in the realm beyond shadows in a grueling duel. Upon only subduing her, Luke Skywalker came to the realization that Abeloth could never truly be killed, but simply dispatched for the period of being. She was beyond even his power, saying that he was only 1/1000th her incredible ability to touch the Force. She was beyond any Jedi or Sith in any existence over the entire span of the Star Wars galaxy. Abeloth was something more, and was truly a god, even according to Grandmaster Luke Skywalker. This was only a narrow sliver of the story of all of Abeloth's atrocities. She was able to single-handedly bring the galaxy to its knees with all of her immense power and command over the Force itself. Over the course of the story, Abeloth was able to influence the Force in truly Lovecraftian ways. She could drain the life energy from any being and consume them, which would allow her to then take the form of her own will. She could create multiple avatars of herself to exist in many places all at once, which is leagues above a Force illusion, which is already a powerful and taxing ability as it was what actually killed Luke Skywalker in Star Wars canon. Abeloth could also fly, and had the most powerful Force healing Luke Skywalker had ever seen, and could disable lightsabers at a distance. But all of this is only the beginning. We also see her use the dark side to detonate a volcano, create deadly seismic activity on Coruscant, and after her mental duel with Vol, an utterly enraged Abeloth released waves of Force energy on Tav that caused the beings in her vicinity to implode, those farther away to be ripped to pieces, the buildings to melt to the ground, and glass and weaponry to fly through the city, looking for someone to hurt so that they could feel the pain that she felt. Besides this, Abeloth was exceptional at telekinesis, able to blast away entire waves of Jedi and Sith around her, and, of course, she was adept at Force lightning. On top of this, it is worth mentioning that she may have even had Yaddle's ability Morchiro, which if you remember was the ability to slow another's vitals to the point of death. I believe she did this to the Chief of State Padmel Oven whilst he was trying to stall the Senate with a long-winded speech while his Chief of Staff was trying to rescue Leia from imprisonment. Abeloth grew tired of his speech and caused him to collapse. Later, he was pronounced dead. All of these insane demonstrations of Force ability confirm a statement that we had both previously made regarding Abeloth, that she is without a doubt one of the most powerful beings in the Star Wars mythos. Comparatively speaking, both Children of Mortis combined were unable to resist her power, and often required aid in dealing with her. Luke Skywalker also required companionship, ironically in the form of a Sith Lord, in order to defeat her in the end, or rather only subdue her. Again, this was Luke Skywalker at the peak of his power. We previously watched Luke use the Force to influence a black hole into collapsing on itself during the Yuzhong-Vong War. And without a doubt, Luke Skywalker is the most powerful Jedi that has ever existed in Legends continuity. It's not even close. The full potential of the Chosen One. Abeloth is truly a terrifying force to be reckoned with, and with barely any that can rival her power. I believe that if she had full run of the galaxy, there might only be a select few individuals that could put a stop to her indefinitely. These individuals being the Force Priestesses. The Force Priestesses were 5 beings that resided on the Wellspring of Life, the home of the midichlorians. Yoda encountered these beings during his travels of self-discovery in Season 6 of the Clone Wars. Perhaps they may be strong enough to collectively exert their will in the Force to indefinitely trap or destroy Abeloth, at least until her shadow would be cast over the galaxy once again, a millennia in the future. This, or potentially even the Beldam spirits from Legends continuity, although their feats have been very limited. Well, my friends,
a new frontier for Star Wars, a new galaxy. That's what Peridea is likely meant to represent. After a long time of stories being told in the galaxy far, far away, it looks like we're now fully entering into a brand new galaxy even further away. Our introduction to this galaxy is Peridea, a planet that reveals to us a completely lore-changing truth, which is that the Night Sisters and the Dathomirians originated from this strange Peridea. Our suspicions now confirmed, the Night Sisters wield their strange magic as a result of the Force manifesting differently in this new galaxy. However, all is not well and wondrous as we would like it to be. There is lurking a great threat behind the shadows, one which is scarcely mentioned by anyone besides Baylan's skull. It is a great threat that Shin believes the Night Sisters and Thrawn are actively running away from, and one that Baylan is convinced is calling out to him. This power could be anything, and yet, a popular theory has quickly surfaced as to what this might be, or who it might be. Old fables have slithered their way out from the dark crevices of legends, and now we must ask ourselves, are we prepared to believe this great power could be the bringer of chaos, Abeloth, the Mother? Trapped far away in a distant galaxy, out of sight and out of mind, this theory suggests that the ones of Mortis have imprisoned Abeloth long ago on Peridea, which is how the original Dathomirians made it to the galaxy in the first place. Well, my friends, today we weigh this theory on our scales and talk about the likelihood and evidence to support this claim. So let's begin the video. For those unaware or just need a refresher, let's talk about Abeloth's origins and her story in Legends. The creature or entity Abeloth was one of the most powerful beings to exist in the galaxy. She was a woman of indiscriminate height with long tentacles for fingers and a wide mouth full of sharp teeth, along with 2 void black eyes. The power she carried within the Force was so terrifying and horrendous that it took the combined might of the Ones in order to trap her away so that she would not spread her corruption to the rest of the galaxy. But this was not who she once was. Many millennia ago, in a time not recorded when the Ones were still on their original jungle homeworld prior to Mortis, there existed a human woman who was fully mortal and in the service of the Ones. We know not her name, but she was simply a servant in their household. Yet, she grew to love the family of the Ones and became greatly endeared to them. The father ended up marrying her, and the son and daughter loved and even respected her. She would end up becoming the mother. For a time, the mother was everything the Ones needed. She kept the son and daughter from their constant warring, and would direct the son's destructive power towards the carving out of caverns, creating valleys on the planet. Because of this, it was said that she was the only one that truly understood the son, and he obeyed her due to that understanding and compassionate love that they had for one another. But nothing lasts forever, and the cold, harsh reality began to set in for the mother. She was mortal, and the Ones were not. She was growing old and frail and would soon die, leaving her beloved family behind to live on in their immortal state and potentially forget about her existence entirely. In fact, due to her old age, she was already beginning to lose her grip on the son and daughter, who both began to ignore her instruction and went back to fighting. Refusing to accept this fate, the desperate mother went and bathed in the pool of knowledge as the daughter once had to gain her abilities, and drank from the font of power as the son once had. Both of these were nexuses of Force energy, light and dark respectively. Yet, the mother was lacking something crucial. She did not have the physiology of the ones who each were celestial adjacent in nature and had the blood of celestials in them, the original wielders of the Force. The two nexuses of power therefore drove her insane, as she was never meant to touch such power. She was mutated into a horrific monster with powers beyond even what the ones of Mortis possessed. Abeloth now was born, and she would return to the household of the Ones and forcefully dominate the son and daughter with sheer might, making them cease their fighting and kneel before her in servitude, just as she once served them. Disgusted by this, the father took his children and abandoned the planet, leaving Abeloth all alone as she always feared. In her despair, the entire jungle planet became twisted and corrupted as a vile place was born, a place of horror, one that was completely under her dominion and sadness. Eventually, the Ones had to trap her and the planet in the center of the galaxy within a place that they called the Maw. With this backstory of Abeloth though, even now and then, over the course of many of hundreds of years, Abeloth would take advantage of the tides turning in the Force, using it to break free of the Maw. When Abeloth did, the son and the daughter had to battle and return her back to where she was banished. In the many Jedi Academy novels, the EU story follows Luke and his Jedi Order as they encounter the now re-emerged Abeloth, the creature who broke out of the Maw unchallenged due to the deaths of the Ones, and the battle with her to stop her plans of domination and corruption of the entire galaxy began. It required Luke reaching levels thought to be unreachable by mortals in the Force in order to defeat her. And even with that, Abeloth was never truly dead, but only incapacitated for many more hundreds of thousands of years. Abeloth's existence was truly horrific, and the power she wielded placed her firmly within the realms of the upper echelons of any Force entity, only rivaled in power and canon by the Force priestesses. But now, how could this translate into Star Wars canon as a whole? If this theory is true, then all that would need to change is the Ones banished Abeloth to a different galaxy, rather than simply trapping her in the Maw. This would actually make a little more sense, and could actually be safer. It would also explain why Abeloth hasn't returned until this point in time. But why do we think that it is Abeloth on Peridea calling to Baylan? All we have to go off of right now is the interaction between Baylan and Shin concerning what and why they're on Peridea in the first place. The clearly nervous Shin deems it a wasteland and says that they need to leave with everyone else, while her master, in the adamant Baylan, is convinced that their new beginning lies on this new world. The way he speaks implies a new order, but perhaps it is much more than this. Perhaps Baylan speaks of new beginnings and power beyond anything you've ever dreamed. Perhaps he intends to awaken Abeloth so that she can take over and remake the galaxy to what he believes is right, as her faithful follower. Perhaps even ascending Baylan and Shin to godhood in the process. We also hear that Baylan says Peridea is a land of dreams and nightmares. This is a frightening statement to make because it all but confirms the sneaking suspicion that it is indeed Abeloth. In Legends, the beloved Queen of the Stars would reach out to the Force sensitives and drive them mad through dreams. Those that she didn't drive insane, she would either dominate their minds or would call them to her so that they could free her. It's awfully suspicious that Baylan appears to be the only one who isn't disturbed by the power of Peridea. Even the Night Sisters fear it. He's drawn to this power, whereas Shin even is repelled. Shin is loyal to her master and clearly trusts him with her life. However, this recent episode is one of the first times that we see her come into conflict with him. She is questioning him harder now as she begins to grow more and more uncertain about this mission. Shin says that it's good Peridea was long forgotten and that they should flee like the Night Sisters are. Shin, showing her cunning perception, can clearly see that the Night Sisters and Thrawn are trying very hard to get off of Peridea for an unknown reason. And the longer that they stay, the more wary Shin is clearly growing of even Baylan. Baylan tries to calm her fears by reassuring her that the two of them are the ones on the bold track to power. In his words, the Night Sisters flee a power greater than their own. This implies that this power is not a Force nexus, but a malevolent living creature. This brings up something else interesting about the entire ordeal: the Night Sisters and their knowledge of Abeloth. In the Dathomirian folklore, the witches worship the Fang God and the Wing Goddess, both of these in direct reference to the animal forms of the son and daughter of Mortis. This is confirmed in Mother Talzin's chapter Wild Power in the Book of the Sith. where there are pictures to reference the fanged god and winged goddess. Clearly the Night Sisters have knowledge of the ones and even worship them. Strangely though, there is no mention of the father in the Dathomirian folklore, perhaps implying that the Night Sisters may not know nearly as much about the ones as they think they do. But let's say that perhaps the father didn't show up to Peridia at any point in time, but the son and daughter did in order to keep Abeloth trapped there. It's likely that the ancient Night Sisters saw them beat back the horrific creature and desired to travel far away from the planet. Perhaps the son and daughter helped them, thus furthering their legend, and continued to worship them when they reached the worlds of Arcana and Dathomir in the known universe. Simply put, whether the ancestral Night Sisters ever actually saw Abeloth or not, they should have a working knowledge of this being by virtue of their familiarity with the Mortis gods. The next thing that comes to mind about this whole debacle is Anakin Skywalker though. As the new overseer of the universe and the effective replacement for the father, does Anakin have a knowledge of Abeloth? And if so, what is he doing about it? If everything we've talked about to this point hasn't been purely speculation, then this is where it begins. Anakin would undoubtedly know of Abeloth. Perhaps this was even the reason that the Force gave him another chance in the afterlife. But if he's holding her back alone, then why should we fear Abeloth's return if the Chosen One is watching? The only thing we can figure is that there is something keeping Anakin from fully being able to do something about Abeloth, likely due to the realm separation, or perhaps he can only indirectly offer his help through guidance rather than direct action. We still aren't sure of the kinds of celestial laws that Anakin's new form must abide by, or if there are any laws at all. But I think the biggest question that we should be asking is Anakin strong enough to hold back Abeloth? Many would answer yes, because he has reached the apex of his power at last. But the problem is that we don't know the full scope of Anakin's true new power in the Force. He definitely eclipses the power of the Father, but so did Abeloth. In fact, it was speculated that Abeloth was more powerful than all three of the Mortis gods. Our guess though is that Anakin's power is not the problem, but rather his direct involvement. As the keeper of the world between worlds, he may not be able to fully intervene in the physical universe's problems. But now, stepping out of universe for a moment, I want to touch on some of the thoughts about how Lucasfilm would move forward with this wisely. Thrawn is the greatest foreseeable threat, and the main antagonist of the foreseeable future. What I am concerned about is if they bring in Abeloth is the proper scaling of the story. Abeloth is far too big of a creature to have worked out on a streaming platform. She will need a trilogy of her own, if not her own saga where she is the main threat. With the main problem right now being the placing of Luke Skywalker and his involvement in the story, as he was the one that directly helped destroy, or rather imprison Abeloth in the first place. The only way I could see them moving forward with this is if they foreshadow Abeloth now and have her actual emergence happen within episodes 10 through 12, likely with a new Jedi Order in order to combat her. Again though, due to the very story of Abeloth being massive. What's clear though is that Abeloth would contain the power that Baylan speaks of, and the power to terrify even the race of Night Sisters. It is likely this otherworldly entity that is trapped in this new galaxy that screams out to Baylan just as Abeloth did in Legends, begging to be freed and offering endless power potentially. I believe that to some extent, Abeloth is the creature that is calling to Baylan, and even if she is not fully revealed in Ahsoka, I do believe that this brand new dark galaxy, one riddled with life and death, has something to do with this abominable creature. But anyway, my mystery on who or what is calling to the fallen Jedi Baylan Skoll continues to develop. And today, we have found something very interesting all the way back in the first Star Wars canon books. Something that indicates that there was another Force-sensitive individual powerful in the Force that could hear something calling to them in the unknown. An individual whom many around them believed had gone mad. An individual whose own apprentice, much like Baylan and Shin, did not sense anything calling to them from the unknown. Greetings my friends, and welcome back to the channel. The mystery of Baylan Skoll is the most intriguing by far proposed by the Ahsoka series. The title of the last episode, Dreams and Madness, was a direct reference to Baylan, his dreams of creating a new order or seeking a power at the beginning. We haven't got a lot of information on exactly who or what Baylan is after, but he has laid out his goals to us. He says that he hates the cycle of war and violence that the Jedi and the Empire bring across the galaxy. and that he seeks to break this never-ending cycle from going directly to the beginning of it all. Baylan also told us that he liked the idea of what a Jedi was supposed to be, but not what it became, not when the weakness steeped into the very veins of the Order. So, why is Baylan the only one that can apparently hear this presence calling to him on Peridea, at least that we know thus far? The Night Mothers under Thrawn have not made any direct reference to what Baylan is after, and at this point, Ezra nor Ahsoka has stated that they have sensed anything interesting about Peridea concerning what Baylan seeks, at least not yet. However, I found something extremely interesting in one of the first trailers that we got for Ahsoka. In the teaser, there was dialogue that has not yet been spoken in the show by Ahsoka Tano herself. The dialogue goes as follows: "Something's coming, something dark. I sense it."
Something's coming. Something dark. I sense it.
This is a line that has not yet been spoken in the series thus far, meaning that Ahsoka in the next episode, the finale, may in fact sense what Baylan is after. What this also tells us is that the thing that Baylan is after is in fact Darkseid in origin. But where things become really interesting is that the other character that we referenced that heard something calling to them in the unknown regions was Emperor Palpatine. In the Star Wars Aftermath novels, Imperial Gallius Rax knows how Palpatine was seemingly going mad, and that towards the end of the Empire in the original trilogy, that Palpatine was obsessed with something calling to him from the unknown regions. This is the exact quote from Star Wars Aftermath Empire's End. The Emperor was convinced that something waited for him out there, some origin of the Force, some dark presence formed of malevolent substance. The Emperor said that he could feel the waves radiating off of it now that the way was clear. The Emperor called it a signal, conveniently one that only he could hear. Even his greatest enforcer, in Vader, seemed oblivious to its calls. And Vader also claimed mastery over the Dark Force, did he not? Rax believed Palpatine had gone mad. What's interesting about Baylan being one of the only characters that this mysterious force calls to could actually indicate to his alignment within the Force. Baylan, as he said, wishes to be something more than a Jedi. He clearly uses the dark side of the Force, but he does not worship it as the Sith do. He does not want to impose war even on the galaxy or death. An extremely interesting line from Baylan in the last episode is when he said that he was not disappointed that Ahsoka Tano had lived, but that she was nearly an obstacle in his way. Baylan, unlike many, including his own apprentice, is not subservious to ambition and the wills and calls of the dark side when it offers power. He views himself more as a holy warrior, seeking to end the cycle of never-ending conflict in the galaxy. But with all of that said, is the same thing that called to Palpatine, now calling to Baylan. And is Baylan actively being tricked? Going mad? Is Baylan being manipulated by a force that seeks to be freed, or seeks his talents in the dark side? With all of that said though, perhaps Baylan's goal is not in fact entirely dark in nature, and despite him being proposed as the villain of the Ahsoka series, perhaps the thing that is calling to Baylan is something akin to the Bendu. Why this is unique is the Bendu, although it was a creature in Star Wars Rebels, is also implied to be a force-based organization, one that was around before the Jedi Order, and one that many have speculated in canon the Jedi Order originated from. Just like in Legends, it is believed that the Bendu were keepers of balance, but that the Jedi ultimately decided to fully embrace the light, those Jedi who were once Bendu. It gets even more interesting than this, as in the original script for Star Wars by George Lucas, the Jedi Knights were known as the Jedi Bendu. Going back to the beginning, literally and figuratively, Baylan's skull in his own seems to represent somebody in the middle. We've gone over it endlessly, but even his lightsaber is not fully red, it's more of an orange color. The way Baylan wields the Force is exceptionally unique, and characters like Baylan are unique to Legends and both canon alike. He uses the structure and foundation of the Jedi Order for his backbone within the Force, never letting the dark side go too far. And yet, he finds that the light side and the Jedi have inherent weakness to them, and therefore embraces the dark to fuel his own power, or rather, fuel his own holy goals. Another interesting connection between Baylan and the Bendu is the fact that neither of them want war, despite the fact that those around them actively seek it. In Season 3 of Star Wars Rebels, the Bendu says, "You have brought war to this quiet world, Kanan Jarrus, Jedi Knight, and I will have no part in it." The Bendu is described as an ancient being, and why he is so important to Star Wars canon when concerning Baylan is he very much represents the one in the middle quite literally. Although this is also admittedly a stretch, I found it quite interesting that the Naughty of Peridea chose to conceal themselves in the same manner that the Bendu did. I believe that the term Bendu is more of a title rather than the direct name of this mythical creature that we encounter in Star Wars Rebels, one in the middle. Could it be the Bendu that is going to break this never-ending cycle of violence between the Jedi and Sith? Finally, harmony found within the middle. This would be exceptionally interesting, as again, in the current Star Wars canon, the Bendu and Baylan have very similar beliefs to each other. Perhaps Baylan dismissed Shin because she was leaning too far into ambition and the wills of the dark side, and was no longer in the middle as Baylan hopes to maintain. With all of that said though, although I believe that Baylan believes some figure like the Bendu is calling to him, I do ultimately believe he's going to be tricked into following something darker, pursuing a knowledge darker than what he actually believes he wields, no longer being a holy warrior, but one tricked by a darker will that seeks to corrupt and destroy. The very nature of the dark side of the Force is that it corrupts and destroys those that wield it. The corruption of the dark side is always something that is going to happen for those that frequently wield it. True balance in Star Wars is not the merging of equal parts light and dark. According to George Lucas himself, he believed that when one was using the light side of the Force, they could control the inner darkness within themselves. This was the balance, realizing their flaws, acknowledging their flaws, in a sense, while the light could keep track of the dark. Not pretend that it wasn't there, not pretend that the dark side didn't exist entirely, but to use one's empathy and understanding to conquer the more sinister urges that one has. In The Art of the Mandalorian, Dave Filoni himself explained what balance meant. Ultimately, the Force is an ability that one can be used selflessly or selfishly, and how one chooses to wield it determines whether you stand on the dark or the light. The dark side of the Force is manifested in our greed, desire for power, and fears, and the light side of the Force is propagated by selfless action, by living in balance, by overcoming our fears. The Force naturally exists in a balance. That balance is thrown out when someone chooses to give in to their fears, and then spirals out of control, making selfish choice after selfish choice. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. Our own ambitions can make the Force into something terrible even when our intentions may have been good. We do not always realize we are acting out of fear or selfishness. Anakin believes he is trying to save his wife. He is afraid to lose her. He chooses to act out of his own fears and try to control the situation. That moment of choice, how we act and react, is so important. The choice between dark and light is often subtle and not limited to the Jedi or the Sith. Everybody struggles between the light and the dark. Could the same mistakes be repeated with Baylan? In an effort to achieve control, does he also seek to unbalance himself, creating false balance and being tricked into following something that does not have his best intentions or the best intentions for the galaxy in mind? I believe that Baylan believes that he's seeking something benevolent like the Bendu, but in the end, the Bendu never sought to control nor to dominate. He wanted no part in the war between the Empire and the Rebels. He was apathetic towards it all. I believe that Baylan seeks something like the balance, seeks something like the Bendu, but that the dark side, and whatever calls to him on Peridea, seeks something far more nefarious. As always, a new frontier for Star Wars, a new galaxy. That's what Peridea is likely meant to represent. After a long time of stories being told in the galaxy far, far away, it looks like we're now fully entering into a brand new galaxy even further away. Our introduction to this galaxy is Peridea, a planet that reveals to us a completely lore-changing truth, which is that the Night Sisters and the Dathomirians originated from this strange Peridea. Our suspicions now confirmed, the Night Sisters wield their strange magic as a result of the Force manifesting differently in this new galaxy. However, all is not well and wondrous as we would like it to be. There is lurking a great threat behind the shadows, one which is scarcely mentioned by anyone besides Baylan's skull. It is a great threat that Shin believes the Night Sisters and Thrawn are actively running away from, and one that Baylan is convinced is calling out to him. This power could be anything. And yet, a popular theory has quickly surfaced as to what this might be, or who it might be. Old fables have slithered their way out from the dark crevices of legends, and now we must ask ourselves, are we prepared to believe this great power could be the bringer of chaos, Abeloth, the mother? Trapped far away in a distant galaxy, out of sight and out of mind, this theory suggests that the ones of Mortis have imprisoned Abeloth long ago on Peridia, which is how the original Dathomirians made it to the galaxy in the first place. Well, my friends, today we weigh this theory on our scales and talk about the likelihood and evidence to support this claim. So let's begin the video. For those unaware or just need a refresher, let's talk about Abeloth's origins and her story in legends. The creature or entity Abeloth was one of the most powerful beings to exist in the galaxy. She was a woman of indiscriminate height with long tentacles for fingers and a wide mouth full of sharp teeth, along with 2 void black eyes. The power she carried within the Force was so terrifying and horrendous that it took the combined might of the Ones in order to trap her away so that she would not spread her corruption to the rest of the galaxy. But this was not who she once was. Many millennia ago, in a time not recorded when the Ones were still on their original jungle homeworld prior to Mortis, there existed a human woman who was fully mortal and in the service of the Ones. We know not her name, but she was simply a servant in their household, yet she grew to love the family of the Ones and became greatly endeared to them. The father ended up marrying her, and the son and daughter loved and even respected her. She would end up becoming the mother. For a time, the mother was everything the Ones needed. She kept the son and daughter from their constant warring, and would direct the son's destructive power towards the carving out of caverns, creating valleys on the planet. Because of this, it was said that she was the only one that truly understood the son, and he obeyed her due to that understanding and compassionate love that they had for one another. But nothing lasts forever, and the cold, harsh reality began to set in for the mother. She was mortal, and the Ones were not. She was growing old and frail and would soon die, leaving her beloved family behind to live on in their immortal state and potentially forget about her existence entirely. In fact, due to her old age, she was already beginning to lose her grip on the son and daughter, who both began to ignore her instruction and went back to fighting. Refusing to accept this fate, the desperate mother went and bathed in the pool of knowledge as the daughter once had to gain her abilities, and drank from the font of power as the son once had. Both of these were nexuses of Force energy, light and dark respectively. Yet, the mother was lacking something crucial. She did not have the physiology of the Ones who each were celestial adjacent in nature and had the blood of celestials in them, the original wielders of the Force. The 2 nexuses of power therefore drove her insane, as she was never meant to touch such power. She was mutated into a horrific monster with powers beyond even what the Ones of Mortis possessed. Abeloth now was born, and she would return to the household of the Ones and forcefully dominate the son and daughter with sheer might, making them cease their fighting and kneel before her in servitude, just as she once served them. Disgusted by this, the father took his children and abandoned the planet, leaving Abeloth all alone as she always feared. In her despair, the entire jungle planet became twisted and corrupted as a vile place was born, a place of horror, one that was completely under her dominion and sadness. Eventually, the Ones had to trap her and the planet in the center of the galaxy within a place that they called the Maw. With this backstory of Abeloth though, even now and then, over the course of many of hundreds of years, Abeloth would take advantage of the tides turning in the Force, using it to break free of the Maw. When Abeloth did, the son and the daughter had to battle and return her back to where she was banished. In the many Jedi Academy novels, the EU story follows Luke and his Jedi Order as they encounter the now re-emerged Abeloth, the creature who broke out of the Maw unchallenged due to the deaths of the Ones, and the battle with her to stop her plans of domination and corruption of the entire galaxy began. It required Luke reaching levels thought to be unreachable by mortals in the Force in order to defeat her. And even with that, Abeloth was never truly dead, but only incapacitated for many more hundreds of thousands of years. Abeloth's existence was truly horrific, and the power she wielded placed her firmly within the realms of the upper echelons of any Force entity, only rivaled in power and canon by the Force priestesses. But now, how could this translate into Star Wars canon as a whole? If this theory is true, then all that would need to change is the ones banished Abeloth to a different galaxy, rather than simply trapping her in the Maw. This would actually make a little more sense, and could actually be safer. It would also explain why Abeloth hasn't returned until this point in time. But why do we think that it is Abeloth on Peridia calling to Balin? All we have to go off of right now is the interaction between Balin and Shin concerning what and why they're on Peridia in the first place. The clearly nervous Shin deems it a wasteland and says that they need to leave with everyone else, while her master, in the adamant Balin, is convinced that their new beginning lies on this new world. The way he speaks implies a new order. But perhaps it is much more than this. Perhaps Balin speaks of new beginnings and power beyond anything you've ever dreamed. Perhaps he intends to awaken Abeloth so that she can take over and remake the galaxy to what he believes is right, as her faithful follower. Perhaps even ascending Balin and Shin to godhood in the process. We also hear that Balin says Peridia is a land of dreams and nightmares. This is a frightening statement to make because it all but confirms the sneaking suspicion that it is indeed Abeloth. In Legends, the beloved Queen of the Stars would reach out to the Force sensitives and drive them mad through dreams. Those that she didn't drive insane, she would either dominate their minds or would call them to her so that they could free her. It's awfully suspicious that Balin appears to be the only one who isn't disturbed by the power of Peridia. Even the Night Sisters fear it. He's drawn to this power, whereas Shin even is repelled. Shin is loyal to her master and clearly trusts him with her life. However, this recent episode is one of the first times that we see her come into conflict with him. She is questioning him harder now as she begins to grow more and more uncertain about this mission. Shin says that it's good Peridia was long forgotten and that they should flee like the Night Sisters are. Shin, showing her cunning perception, can clearly see that the Night Sisters and Thrawn are trying very hard to get off of Peridia for an unknown reason. And the longer that they stay, the more wary Shin is clearly growing of even Balin. Balin tries to calm her fears by reassuring her that the two of them are the ones on the bold track to power. In his words, the Night Sisters flee a power greater than their own. This implies that this power is not a Force nexus, but a malevolent living creature. This brings up something else interesting about the entire ordeal: the Night Sisters and their knowledge of Abeloth. In the Dathomirian folklore, the witches worship the Fang God and the Wing Goddess, both of these in direct reference to the animal forms of the son and daughter of Mortis. This is confirmed in Mother Talzin's chapter Wild Power in the Book of the Sith, where there are pictures to reference the Fanged God and Winged Goddess. Clearly the Night Sisters have knowledge of the ones and even worship them. Strangely though, there is no mention of the father in the Dathomirian folklore, perhaps implying that the Night Sisters may not know nearly as much about the ones as they think they do. But let's say that perhaps the father didn't show up to Peridia at any point in time, but the son and daughter did in order to keep Abeloth trapped there. It's likely that the ancient Night Sisters saw them beat back the horrific creature and desired to travel far away from the planet. Perhaps the son and daughter helped them, thus furthering their legend, and continued to worship them when they reached the worlds of Arcana and Dathomir in the known universe. Simply put, whether the ancestral Night Sisters ever actually saw Abeloth or not, they should have a working knowledge of this being by virtue of their familiarity with the Mortis gods. The next thing that comes to mind about this whole debacle is Anakin Skywalker though. As the new overseer of the universe and the effective replacement for the father, does Anakin have a knowledge of Abeloth? And if so, what is he doing about it? If everything we've talked about to this point hasn't been purely speculation, then this is where it begins. Anakin would undoubtedly know of Abeloth. Perhaps this was even the reason that the Force gave him another chance in the afterlife. But if he's holding her back alone, then why should we fear Abeloth's return if the Chosen One is watching? The only thing we can figure is that there is something keeping Anakin from fully being able to do something about Abeloth, likely due to the realm separation, or perhaps he can only indirectly offer his help through guidance rather than direct action. We still aren't sure of the kinds of celestial laws that Anakin's new form must abide by, or if there are any laws at all. But I think the biggest question that we should be asking is Anakin strong enough to hold back Abeloth? Many would answer yes, because he has reached the apex of his power at last. But the problem is that we don't know the full scope of Anakin's true new power in the Force. He definitely eclipses the power of the father, but so did Abeloth. In fact, it was speculated that Abeloth was more powerful than all 3 of the Mortis gods. Our guess though is that Anakin's power is not the problem, but rather his direct involvement. As the keeper of the world between worlds, he may not be able to fully intervene in the physical universe's problems. But now, stepping out of universe for a moment, I want to touch on some of the thoughts about how Lucasfilm would move forward with this wisely. Thrawn is the greatest foreseeable threat, and the main antagonist of the foreseeable future. What I am concerned about is if they bring in Abeloth is the proper scaling of the story. Abeloth is far too big of a creature to have worked out on a streaming platform. She will need a trilogy of her own, if not her own saga where she is the main threat. With the main problem right now being the placing of Luke Skywalker and his involvement in the story, as he was the one that directly helped destroy, or rather imprison, Abeloth in the first place. The only way I could see them moving forward with this is if they foreshadow Abeloth now and have her actual emergence happen within episodes 10 through 12, likely with a new Jedi Order in order to combat her. Again though, due to the very story of Abeloth being massive. What's clear though is that Abeloth would contain the power that Baylan speaks of, and the power to terrify even the race of Night Sisters. It is likely this otherworldly entity that is trapped in this new galaxy that screams out to Baylan just as Abeloth did in Legends, begging to be freed and offering endless power potentially. I believe that to some extent, Abeloth is the creature that is calling to Baylan, and even if she is not fully revealed in Ahsoka, I do believe that this brand new dark galaxy, one riddled with life and death, has something to do with this abominable creature. But anyway,
Where
my
did
friends,
the Ones of Mortis actually come from? The Ones of Mortis were among the most interesting additions to Star Wars canon upon their debut in the Clone Wars TV series. The daughter, a representative of the light side of the Force, the son, an embodiment of the dark, and the father, representing the balance between both. This family of 3 utterly turned the way we viewed the Force upside down. But as the Mortis arc showed, these beings may have been indeed very powerful and nigh immortal, but they were far from gods. They could be influenced, weakened, and even killed. In fact, all 3 were killed by the ending of this plot arc. The Ones of Mortis, for a long time, were widely revered as the embodiment of the Force itself. But of course, this would ultimately prove to be false. Despite their fantastical appearances and grandiose command over the Force, they were in fact just a unique race of beings just like all others in the galaxy. But the question we have today is, where did the Ones of Mortis come from? Despite what many may believe, the Ones of Mortis haven't been around forever and do in fact have an origin. So my friends, come with us today as we explore some ancient ruins and wipe the dust off of the scrolls of the past, as we now dive into the origins of the Ones. First though, according to our analytics, a lot of you that watch the channel haven't actually subscribed yet, so if you want to stay up to date with everything Star Wars lore related, force crush that subscribe button. Now acolytes, let us begin. The Ones were said to have arisen from a geyser on an unknown tropical planet. This account was given by a species known as the Killik and their oldest member by the name of Tharut. He claimed that the Ones were a remnant of a people known as the Celestials. The history of the Celestials is a bit muddled. First though, an interesting part of the species known as the Killik who first identified the Ones of Mortis is that they do not distinguish between the fact and fiction like humans or other races do. Whether it be mythology, proven history, or even a TV show on the HoloNet, it is all history to them and all factual. They are unable to distinguish between the two. Secondly, we are talking about having to go nearly 1,000,000 years back, which is some of the longest we've ever gone back in the history of this channel in terms of Star Wars lore. Just for a quick comparison, the Jedi Order didn't begin until about the year 37,000 BBY. Of course, BBY means before the Battle of Yavin, or basically the events of A New Hope. In this era, the Galactic Republic was still a long way away from ever being formed, and the powers of the Rakatan Empire were beginning to rise. The Rakatans being an ancient force-wielding species that used the dark side, that far outdated even the Sith. According to the accounts of Tharut, the Killik people were in service to the ancient and very powerful people known as the Celestials. The Celestials wielded powers in the Force that were beyond comprehension, and they used their powers and the service of the Killiks to become architects of a massive and awe-inspiring machines, which they then left behind in the galaxy. The identities of the Celestials were considered largely a mystery due to a lack of information on them. Evidence of their works led many to determine that the galaxy was once visited by these stunningly powerful alien architects. Even their appearance was something of a mystery. The Celestials were said to have a malleable form, meaning that it was subject to change. Another theory even states that they were a group of discorporate entities who had perhaps merged themselves with the Force thousands of generations earlier and continued to guide the fate of the galaxy ever since. Essentially, beings that joined with the Force itself. According to the Killiks, a connection was present between the Celestials and the Ones. It was believed that the Ones were descendants of these Celestials. Similarly, the Gris-Qua and the Rakata species acted as servant races to the Celestials alongside the Killiks. Essentially, the Celestials were the gods of the time. Together, they worked to build astonishing technology projects that range from the assembly of star systems to the engineering of hyperspace anomalies. These machines would also include the likes of the Centerpoint Station, which had the ability to pull entire planets into its tractor beam, as well as created the Cosmic Turbine, which could manipulate gravity on a mass scale using hyperspace technology. These ancient architects were also said to be responsible for seeding the core worlds and establishing life on them with the human race. The human race, which at the time was referred to as the Zell. Pre-Republic specialists believed that the Celestials were responsible for the circumferential hyperspace barrier, possibly as a defense against outside interference, which would include the Rakatan Empire, as well as the species such as the Yuzhong Vong, or perhaps most terrifying of all, the Null Null. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Null Null, I recommend checking out our video on why traveling to the unknown regions was nearly impossible and spelled certain death. Anyway, Null Null actually claimed to have been around to witness the golden age of the Celestials, and was there whenever they created the hyperspace barrier, the barrier that would ban the Null Null from the known Star Wars universe. Around 35,000 BBY, the Rakatan race revolted against the Celestials and decided to wage war on the other servant races. Despite the Celestials' efforts, the Rakata broke through the barrier and waged war of an extermination upon all of them. The ancient grimoires of the Gris Enclave, who referred to the Celestials as the Ancient Masters, recorded that their work was undone nearly entirely by the curses unleashed by the Rakatan Empire. The Rakatan Empire would soon give rise as they tapped into the dark side of the Force and used the stolen technology from the Celestials to create a weapon known as the Force Saber, which was essentially the primordial precursor to the lightsaber, only used entirely with the dark side. According to the ancient species, another contributor to the disappearance of the Celestials was attributed to the being known as Abeloth. The eventual fate of the Celestials was unclear though. They may have been trapped inside the galaxy by their barrier and destroyed by the Rakatan revolt, the gods themselves coming to an end. Or they may have escaped through the barrier into the unknown regions of space. Pre-Republic scientists suggest that they may have withdrawn from this dimension completely. The Dark Lord Darth Plagueis mused on the possibility that the Celestials were the ones who, according to Jedi and Sith legend, merged into the Force to control its path, with them being the Force itself. Either way, we are left in the dark with what happened to the Celestials. The only ones who might know would have been the ones of Mortis, the descendants of the very Celestials. So friends,
Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In the recent episodes of Ahsoka, everyone was shocked to see Anakin Skywalker in solid form in the world between worlds. It was so shocking in fact that it was almost too good to be true. Many theorized that it was perhaps the work of the ones of Mortis, who had somehow survived the events and deaths of the three of them, with the most popular reigning theory being that Anakin was actually the son of Mortis in disguise. While this theory was proven to be incorrect, it did get me starting to think about the son of Mortis as well as all of the overlords of the world. The whole story and lesson of the Mortis arc is heavily debated and often it is misinterpreted, and this goes back to the fundamental reality of the ones themselves and their roles within the Force and how their roles are often misunderstood. But the individual that is most misunderstood of all of them is the son of Mortis. As the representative of the dark side, he gets a bad rap and is wrongfully stuck with the label of being pure evil. Yet, although he made decisions and had goals that were morally reprehensible, the son himself was not evil. In this video, we have decided to do a character study on the son of Mortis, starting out with his creation, his ambitions, and getting into why he was actually not evil like Palpatine or the Sith, despite being the ambassador for the dark side of the Force itself. Before we get into it though, we're going to be continuing to cover more of these high concept topics as the new episodes of Ahsoka are released. There are so many more mysteries to uncover and we want you to be a part of it, so if you've been enjoying these videos, consider subscribing. But now, on to the sun. The biggest misunderstanding of the sun starts with who, or rather what, he actually is. He is the third of the beings known as the Ones. They are incorrectly referred to as Force gods, and erroneously called Celestials, though we'll get into what that is in just a moment. When the Mortis arc first aired, it was believed that the Father, the Daughter, and the Son were the Force itself, or at least physical representations of their respective domains born out of the Force. Most had the idea that they were essentially the gods of the Force, and had total control over those energies. To this very day, some still think this way, but this is incorrect. The Ones are referred to as the gods of Mortis just for easy understanding, but they are not deities, despite the fact that the Night Sisters worship the Son and Daughter, but that's not really relevant to our point here. The Ones are shown to be quite ancient, powerful, and extremely knowledgeable. It was assumed that they are immortal, but as the Father proved, they were not. They have existed for thousands of years, but it's clear that they actually just age much more slowly. The Father was getting old and too weak to keep his warring children in line, which was the entire crux of bringing Anakin to Mortis in the first place. However, when they are at the height of their power, it is shown that only the Mortis dagger is capable of actually wounding or killing one of them. At the end of the arc though, the Son was stabbed with a lightsaber instead of the dagger, but that was because his power was tied to his father's life, and when he was stabbed with the Mortis dagger, that power left the Son vulnerable. So if the gods of Mortis are not actually gods at all, where did they come from? Unfortunately for the time being, this answer only lies in legends. The one are most closely related to the beings known as the Celestials, of whom we unfortunately know very little even in Legends continuity. The only information that exists about the mysterious race of Celestials is that they were extremely powerful beings that had near complete power in the Force. The Celestials enslaved a few species in the unknown regions and built grand structures such as the Centerpoint Station, the Cosmic Turbine, and the Corellian system. They were also the ones who evidently set in place the Great Hyperspace Barrier. The barrier, which is a cluster of stars, gases, and nebula that encase the galaxy, thus making hyperspace travel outside of the known galaxy extremely treacherous and rare. The Rakata Empire were one such slave species of the Celestials before they rebelled. For some unknown reason, the Celestials one day mysteriously vanished without a single trace, and they have never been heard from again. With that said though, one of the former servant species of the Celestials, known as the Killik, had a single elder of their species, named Tharut, who distinctly remembered the coming of the Ones of Mortis. According to the account of Tharut, the origin of the Ones is revealed. According to the Elder, the Ones coalesced and came out of a geyser on an unknown jungle world that was extremely potent with the Force. The only thing that Tharut tells us about the Ones actually is this single quote: "The Ones are what the Celestials become." This cryptic explanation is the only thing that we can go off of. So basically the Ones aren't exactly Celestials, but more like descendants, relatives, or maybe even evolutions of the Celestial race. So although there isn't much to gather, we do have one very important piece of information. They are extremely powerful in the Force as an innate ability, more powerful than any other Force-sensitive species, excluding only the Bedlam spirits, Force priestesses, and the other high-concept beings that are in the lore, but those beings are not flesh and blood. Evidently though, the Ones of Mortis are. What's incredibly interesting though, is that it is told to us that the Ones did not start out as being representations of the light, the dark, and the balance. They were just incredibly powerful beings that inhabited this Force-rich jungle world, until one day, the Son defied his father's direct orders and drank from the Font of Power. The Font of Power was a Force nexus of dark side energy that not only granted him powers beyond belief, but soon, the Son became a representation of the dark side itself. The Son does not have complete dominion over it, but he essentially was adopted to become the embodiment of it, its representation in the physical. In response, the Daughter desired to balance him out and keep him from running rampant with his newfound power. So she also defied the father's command and bathed in the pool of knowledge. The pool of knowledge was a nexus of the light side, and the same thing happened with her. With both children now warped and consigned to their respective sides of the Force, they took up residence in specific parts of the jungle, beginning a destructive war against one another. The father was ultimately forced to take upon himself the burden of becoming the balance, as he did his best to keep the peace. It is assumed that the Force nexuses of the Font of Power and Pool of Knowledge had a unique effect on the ones, and granted them power because of their celestial adjacent DNA, which is why they turned out to be representatives of sides of the Force. We know that this is unique because when a mortal, the woman who once became known as the Mother, drank from the font and bathed in the pool, the Mother became twisted and mutated by the intense energies and was transformed into the monster known as Abeloth. But anyway, all this is to go and say that the sun is not the dark side itself, but was once a person. This is an extremely important note to keep in mind. What the Son actually wanted was not really spelled out for us very clearly in the Mortis arc. He presented himself to Anakin as one who wanted to take an active role in the state of the galaxy by destroying both the Sith as well as the Jedi in order to usher in a brand new era of peace, one that Anakin would later contemplate. While we aren't sure of the legitimacy of his desire for peace, we know that he indeed would destroy the Sith and the Jedi to establish only a small few Force sensitives, only his followers. It's more likely that the Son was following the will of the dark side to spread his corruption and warring so that the entire galaxy would be plunged into darkness. This would feed his power and make him even stronger. Another talking point that the dark side promises. We know that this is possible because the daughter even outed him for gaining power from all of the conflict happening between Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka. Not to mention he was growing in power because of the Clone Wars. The Son got strong enough from this to usurp his weakened father and overthrow him. So if he had been able to corrupt the entire galaxy, or even just a single planet, he would have been unstoppable. But this is only the surface level for the Son. It's far more likely that he just wanted freedom. This was one of his biggest grievances that he had with the father. The fact that he wasn't allowed to leave Mortis. He was, in a sense, trapped there. Once he took the throne and his sister confronted him, the Son declares that she isn't strong enough to keep him there. That was the goal of all of his plotting, to leave Mortis. Freedom is a basic need for just about any living being, no matter what level of existence they find themselves on. The Son's want for freedom likely began as an innocent one, being a nigh-immortal being with immense power confined to a single world for what was essentially eternity, weighed on him heavy. He just wanted to get away of the stress of constantly butting heads with his sister and his father. But that's the thing. Despite all of that, he loved his family dearly. When his mother was pure, a mere mortal, he loved her deeply, and would even obey what was asked of her. The Son was more than capable of love, and we see this during his brief moments of clarity. Clarity from the veil of ambition, and darkness that has settled on his mind. The Son is a victim of the dark side itself. The Mortis arc is him falling to the dark side. The Son is not evil, but simply has his own selfish desires. The daughter even mentions that he can't help but be selfish, ambitious, because it's in his nature. The daughter even implores of her father not to hate the Son because of it. But no matter who or what you are, the dark side corrupts all intentions, no matter how innocent, noble, or initially pure. Without having the light within a person, the dark side will drag them down. One cannot hope to control the dark side without at least a modicum of the light within them. This is where it becomes important to remember that although the Son represents the dark side, he does not have dominion over it. On the contrary, it has dominion over him. He warred constantly with his sister and rebelled endlessly from his father. He even declared that he hated his father. But none of this was true. It was all a self-deception born from his anger at his family, a misunderstanding that they would never understand him, nor what he truly wanted. He loved his family deeply, and we see this when he has a moment of clarity after killing his sister. He was about to kill his father with the Mortis blade, but the daughter stepped in between them and sacrificed herself. Mortified by his actions, the son looks at his hands before crying out in despair and flying away. He was deeply distressed and wrought with guilt over his involvement with his sister's death, only causing him to sink deeper into the dark side itself. We later get a scene of him entering the daughter's tomb to recover the Mortis dagger. Upon seeing her body, there's a tender moment where we see the son's true self. He mentions that his sister was the only one he ever truly loved, even admitting the irony of it. But even that isn't true, as in his final moments, he reconciles with his father. Once the father stabs himself with the Mortis blade, clarity returns to the son's sight, as he became overcome with emotion at seeing the last of his family pass on. Despite spending a great deal of time trying to kill his father, and even making several attempts on his life, the son spent his last moments begging the father not to die and not to leave him, and the father got to spend his last moments being proven correctly that no, his son was not evil, not at all, that there was still good in him. The father did not want the son to leave Mortis for his own good. The father didn't allow his son to drink from the font of power, doing so because he knew what would happen to him. And he didn't allow the son to leave Mortis because he could see what the son was becoming. In fact, the father was trying to save the son from himself. If anything, the father knew the dark side better than the son ever could, because the son was blinded by ambition and being seduced by the very force that he represented. The dark side twisted and corrupted him to the point where he couldn't even recognize his own feelings towards his family. Not until it was too late. Had the son and the daughter left Mortis, their warring would have caused a violent imbalance within the Force, which would rend the galaxy in half, as all the systems would band together on either one side or the other, tearing itself apart. The ones of Mortis had a distinct influence within the Force because of their intense power with those respective sides. If that happened, the father would be too weak to keep the peace between the two of them. The son would have delved deeper into the dark side by gaining power from the conflict, and he would be completely lost to it. But in the end, even if the son won, he would have been completely remorseful and lost in despair. The Mortis arc details the son's very fall, or rather, corruption by the dark side itself. It is one of the most tragic stories in all of the lore. The irony of it all was that he showed Anakin what would happen to him in the future. All of the while, the son was completely blind to the fact that Anakin's future was happening to himself in that very moment. He was giving away his family for power. But anyway, my friends, what's up and welcome back to the channel. Episode 5 of Ahsoka Shadow Warrior is now in full swing, and what we got was absolutely mind-blowing. For most of the episode, Anakin Skywalker had come back from the dead to teach Ahsoka one final lesson. When we first saw Anakin in episode 4, there was much speculation as to who or what he actually was. Some believed it was his Force ghost given a solid body for a brief time. Others thought perhaps that it was even the son in disguise, the last remnants of Mortis. But here, on our channel, we have theorized that Anakin had actually ascended from his death and become the final god of Mortis. Or perhaps we could even call him the last Celestial. Although we were never given a straight answer on how Ahsoka got to the world between worlds, or how Anakin met her there, we believe that through many context clues, it would seem that our theory was correct. So today, my friends, come along with us as we open up yet another holocron and talk about the divine Master Skywalker. Anakin here certainly was not a Force ghost because he lacked all distinctive characteristics of a Force ghost. Not only that, but ghosts typically manifest in the physical plane, not in the world between worlds. Anakin was able to use his lightsaber and interact solidly with Ahsoka. He was definitely whole and tangible. We also learned that he was not the son of Mortis because he did not try to lead Ahsoka to the dark side or tell her things to give himself or her power through it. Rather, he was truly teaching her and trying to get her to learn a lesson about herself and about the Jedi. Teaching her about learning to evolve as a Jedi and evolve within herself. Because of how the whole sequence ended, with Ahsoka waking up in the water, it is tempting to believe that it had all just been a simple vision. However, it seemed as though the show was going out of its way to show us that this was not a vision. With Jacen Syndulla able to hear the lightsabers in the water, it was far more real than a vision granted by the Force. Not only that, but Anakin knew things that Ahsoka would not have known. Therefore, it couldn't have been from her own head. The moment that Anakin challenged his own apprentice to a duel, Ahsoka said, "I won't fight you," to which Anakin simply responded, "I've heard that before." While many have said that this is what Ahsoka said to Darth Vader during their duel on Malachor, what Ahsoka actually said there was, "I will not leave you, not this time." When Anakin says, "I've heard that before," this is an undeniably clear reference to how Vader and Luke interacted in Return of the Jedi aboard the second Death Star, an interaction that Ahsoka would have no knowledge about. Ahsoka had certainly been metaphysically transported to the world between worlds. It seems with Anakin's themes of live or die, perhaps it's implied that Ahsoka was in a state of limbo. She had been dead, but not exactly. Her spirit, or essence, went to the world between worlds rather than being instantly dead and transported into the netherrealm of the Force. And now her master, giving her another chance at life. This was likely due to the fact that she had pieces of the daughter left behind in her. Rather than being dead, she got a redo. We know that the daughter's influence follows Ahsoka even into the world between worlds. We know this because Moray was there during the Rebels series. This was not a metaphorical world between worlds at all, but was rather the real thing. And within the world between worlds, Anakin was the master, the influencer of it all. He was the balance that was previously held by the Mortis gods. Anakin is able to manipulate all around him with no effort whatsoever. We feel as though this was foreshadowed in the Clone Wars. If you remember on Mortis, there was a moment when the father forced Anakin in using his power to dominate the son and daughter. When that happened, the day turned to night and the floor began to glow. Let's analyze that scene a little more closely now though. The circles and symbols in the sky, as well as the way the floor glowed in a starry pattern. It looks almost identical to the world between worlds, and all symbols that pertain to it, especially in the ones painting on Lothal. I believe that when Anakin was using his full power as the Chosen One on Mortis, he brought a little piece of the world between worlds to Mortis itself. Or perhaps, Mortis exists as a portal between the physical plane and the world between worlds. Either way, it shows that Anakin's destiny was to always become this being which controls this plane. The world between worlds obeys his command. He is able to shape it around him with apparently a mere thought, even to the point where he can take himself and others to any point in time without needing gateways, or even needing the other person to join him willingly. Anakin himself also seems to be able to change his appearance and shape reality around him as he sees fit, as he could alter his own appearance and cause visions of Vader to flash around him. In this realm, Anakin Skywalker is no longer a person. He is not a Jedi. Perhaps he isn't even the Chosen One, but something far more, an entity like we've never seen before. The calling him a Mortis god doesn't even feel right anymore, as he seems even beyond this, his duties proceeding in the afterlife and beyond. Now, we can only compare him to in Legends continuity, and only very brief mentions in canon to the Celestials. What is clear though, is that at least in this point in time, we theorize that Anakin Skywalker has accepted the duties of the father, the son, and the daughter. He represents the light, the dark, and the balance all at once. Again, at least at this point in time. But back to the Celestials, and going even deeper. While we don't know exactly what the Celestials were, only that they were a race of extremely powerful builders who could use the Force in a way that was impossibly powerful, so strong in fact, that they remain theorized to be the strongest entities in the galactic mythos besides maybe the deep legends Bedlam spirits. The Celestials are responsible for the Great Hyperspace Barrier, and many technological marvels that establish the galaxy as we know. From all that we know, they could have been the very first Force sensitives. It's even possible that their entire people were a race of Chosen Ones, basically meaning they were all like Anakin with insanely high potentials, the literal children of the Force, akin to perhaps gods. Anakin may in fact be the very last of the Celestials. It was foretold by the Father that this was Anakin's destiny. The ones themselves were not even celestial beings, but were distant relatives or descendants of the race of Celestials. The son drank from the font of power, and the daughter bathed in the pool of knowledge, both of which were dark and light side nexuses of the Force respectively. The father would indulge in both, and these nexuses, mixed with their celestial DNA, they managed to become representations of the dichotomy of balance, light, and dark sides of the Force. All of this to foreshadow the coming of one who would take their place, and basically become all three. A being perfectly centered in the Force with total mastery of the world between worlds, to forever control it and keep the universe together. The very last Celestial, the very last builder, the last child of the Force, Anakin Skywalker. Now, admittedly, that part of the Celestials is a bit of a stretch, as it's entirely possible that Anakin, being the first and only child of the Force, has his duty to maintain balance, and the Celestials were simply an extremely powerful race of Force sensitives that predated even the Mortis gods. Nonetheless, we thought it an interesting part of the theory to impart upon you, even if we ourselves don't believe it entirely. What we do believe, though, is Anakin seems to have mastered both sides of the Force, as he is able to provide Ahsoka with a great deal of knowledge and urge her to make decisive action with her life, something which is inherently light. Then to push his point home, he embraced the dark side and decided to poke the bruise she had about Vader. He allowed himself to literally become Vader, to target her feelings of insecurity, of indecisiveness, to push her to make a decision. In the end though, Anakin Skywalker truly is the balance between the light and the dark sides of the Force respectively. The duties of the Mortis gods, the light, the dark, and the balance, now belong to Skywalker. Anakin Skywalker is no longer seduced by the dark side, he has mastered it. He has accepted what happened to him in his life, and has long since moved past it in a way to where he is now perfectly in balance. My friends, this is full potential Anakin, but of course, what do you think? Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In Ahsoka Episode 5, we got to revisit the world between worlds. When this happened, Ahsoka met back up with Anakin, who seemed to be some sort of cosmic entity, a being in time with complete control over the realm that they resided in. During her excursion and adventures with the world between worlds, Anakin began to teach her a final lesson which he named Live or Die. This, however, was far more than a black and white reality of whether Ahsoka wanted to come back to life or not. It was about finding the life within herself and finding life with the Jedi Order, or letting both of them die with her. All of this was culminating in Ahsoka's decision to possibly return to the Jedi, but in a different way. Many of us theorized that she would be coming out of this interaction as Ahsoka the White, which is what we saw in Rebels. In a way, sort of she did, as Ahsoka has changed her garb and now seems to be much more optimistic. She's one step closer to Ahsoka the White, but isn't quite there yet. So today, we will be opening up a holocron and discussing specifically what Anakin's lesson was, what Ahsoka the White even is, and how we know it's plausible. Before we begin though, we have had a terrible vision through the Force. Many who visit our archives have not yet subscribed to our order, so if you've been enjoying the daily holocron openings, reach out and crush that subscribe button. It is your destiny. In Episode 5, a heavy focus on the Clone Wars flashbacks is Ahsoka dealing with the horrors of war and the constant loss of life despite the Jedi's sworn duty to protect it. As a grown woman revisiting her youth, Ahsoka realizes just how messed up the Clone Wars truly was as an environment for a Padawan, especially one to be trained in. As we saw in the episode from Anakin's own mouth, he never really trained her in the conventional ways of a Jedi, but the Clone Wars was Ahsoka's training. She became a hardened warrior and resents the Jedi Order for this fact. Ahsoka cares far more about preserving life than taking it, an admirable and ideal quality for a Jedi. As she accurately points out, the way the Jedi were in the Clone Wars was most certainly not the Jedi way. This is a sentiment that many of us can agree with and have agreed with for a very long time. And yet, Anakin swings back at this with an argument we haven't quite considered before. What if this was a good thing? What if the Clone Wars and the legacy of the Jedi was always meant to culminate in a brand new Ahsoka the White? One of the lessons he was imparting was the Jedi themselves, with his main point being that they have to change in order to adapt to the galaxy around them. He says when Obi-Wan trained him, it was about keeping the peace, but since the Clone Wars broke out, he had to train Ahsoka to be a soldier and a warrior. Ahsoka though rejects this and asks if that's all she is, and that's why Anakin said that she still wasn't understanding. Ahsoka has been living her whole life since 19 BBY with one foot in the Jedi and one foot out. Anakin was forcing her to make a decision and to choose. Anakin needed to make her see that it was her turn to redefine the Jedi for the current era and the current galaxy. Different eras of the galaxy need different Jedi, their legacy always imparted on the next. Maybe the idea that we have the right Jedi would have been disastrous for the galaxy in the state that it was in the Clone Wars. The Jedi of the Republic Classic era may have lost the sight of the way of the peacekeeping order and became soldiers. But maybe that's what the galaxy needed. Anakin is now trying to get Ahsoka to see that it is her time to decide what kind of Jedi the galaxy needs now. The The lesson will ultimately lead Ahsoka into a deep relationship with the Force, the light side, which is a road that ends with Ahsoka the White, a more enlightened, literally and figuratively version. But what exactly is Ahsoka the White on a deeper level? Well, Ahsoka the White is her ultimate destination, and perhaps it is her destiny. We once spoke of a time when Ahsoka would take the place of the daughter of Mortis in the future, as the representative and watchman over the light side of the Force. She would be with Anakin, keeping the balance in the Force and the universe. So how exactly is this all possible? And how do we know that Ahsoka has some semblance of deity within her? Well, Ahsoka still has parts of the daughter. On Mortis, after the daughter sacrificed herself, she made the decision to transfer the rest of her life force into Ahsoka, which meant that a piece of the daughter now lives on. We know this because of Moray, a mystical servant of the daughter that follows and adheres now to Ahsoka, even to the point of being able to pass into the world between worlds herself and meet Ahsoka and direct Ezra to her. This idea of the daughter's influence within Ahsoka Tano is further explored in how she interacts with the world between worlds. Just like Anakin has power over it, so too does Ahsoka. Ahsoka seems to have a small amount of innate knowledge of this place, and is connected to it in some way that she cannot yet explain. When she is pulled through one of the gateways in Rebels by Ezra, she is confused for a moment, but shortly receives an understanding of what the place is. It was then when she knew that not only could Ezra not alter the past in the way that he wanted to save Kanan, but Ahsoka also understood that they had to go back through the gates from which they came and not any other. The daughter and the world between worlds is connected because that is the will of the ones. In the painting on Lothal, it was the daughter's hand that opened the portal itself. Clearly that is highly representational, as the daughter pretty much being the key to unlocking the realm in the first place. So it would stand to reason that Ahsoka has an innate connection, and perhaps even a minor influence over the world between worlds. We can also see this happening during her flashbacks. She was inhabiting her younger body in that memory of the moment and time. Now this could be from Anakin's influence, but he was able to connect with Ahsoka in some way, and use the world between worlds to venture throughout her memories, doing so in order to teach her lessons through them. This uses this realm in a way that we have never seen before, perhaps in a way that is unique to Ahsoka Tano. So what is the purpose of Ahsoka the White? Ahsoka the White will usher in a new age for the Jedi. She will represent a light side of the Force that has long since been lost to the Jedi of the Clone Wars, and she will reunite the Jedi with the light. But this time, without them becoming too dogmatic and throwing out the balance. A Jedi who will not be blinded and will fight when necessary, but will not be defined by war and destruction. Anakin's lesson and the choice to live or die is not just about Ahsoka. It's about the choice whether to allow the teachings and the spirit of Anakin Skywalker, and even the rest of the Jedi Order, to live or die completely. Luke Skywalker is doing his own thing with the new Jedi Order, but Ahsoka holds all of the teachings from a direct legacy of powerful and wise Jedi Masters, ones that experience the Force in a very unique way. It may be unlikely for Ahsoka to start her own new Jedi Order, since Luke Skywalker already is, but that may be a contingency plan for when Luke's order gets destroyed eventually. The next option, though, is that Ahsoka starts a Jedi Order within the new galaxy that the pathway to Peridia is leading. The Peridian Galaxy may need Ahsoka's influence in the end. However, I'm not quite sure that this will be the answer either. The only thing that I feel confident in this moment is option 3. Ahsoka the White is the new representation of the light side of the Force, the new daughter, if you will. The one who will live on with Anakin Skywalker in the world between worlds to maintain balance. Ahsoka will become like an urban legend within the Force and the galaxy itself, a being so powerful in the light that she represents the way to it entirely. She will be able to do what the daughter was never able to do, truly preserve life in the galaxy, teaching many others to do the same along the way. But of course, this is only our thoughts on Ahsoka the White, the enlightened version of this ultimate guardian of the light side of the Force. Dave Filoni has stated several times that he always views Ahsoka as this sort of guardian figure, the Gandalf of Star Wars, if you will. But the story of Ahsoka, and moving forward, is a journey to this enlightenment, shedding the gray clothes and opening the light side of the Force within her fully, becoming Ahsoka the White. But anyway, my greetings, curious acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to the archives. Throughout our studies of the Force, both light and dark, there are very few abilities in the spectrum that the Sith aren't privy to. In fact, it seems as if the Sith actually have a much more wide array of Force abilities than that of even the Jedi, mostly because they are willing to explore and experiment with the lengths of the Force in order to acquire more power and knowledge. With almost every ability of the light side, there is almost always a dark side version to counter it. Before in our holocron openings, we have talked about how Sith have found ways to answer life after death by binding their spirits to objects, and how they have made up for the dark side's weaknesses by creating abilities such as dark healing. With that said though, today's holocron means something different, as there are yet at least 2 more light side abilities that the Sith can not only not manage to replicate, but absolutely hate because of the nature of these abilities. Today, my friends, we are going to delve into the 2 of the most powerful light side abilities that are available for use for the Jedi, those abilities being Force Binding and Force Light. As fascinating as the Sith's overwhelming power can be in the Force, it is certainly enjoyable when we find a few advantages that give Jedi a leg up on their power-hungry counterparts. Before we get into it though, there is a massive sale on the Star Wars merch page for the holiday season. So if you're interested in gifting any Star Wars merch, or getting merch for yourself, you can find everything up to 40% off. In addition, if you use code WAVE at checkout, you'll get an additional 15% off your entire order. So my friends, now is the time. But with that out of the way, let us prepare to defend against the forces of the dark side, and let us analyze the 2 Force abilities that the Sith hate more than anything else. To begin, we will be talking about Force Binding, a power that has recently been introduced into Star Wars canon via the High Republic novels. Force Binding is an act of multiple Jedi coming together in one ceremony to combine their power to mute the powers of a dark side artifact. In other words, it gave its users the ability to contain the influence that a Sith artifact had on its surroundings. This was the method that the Jedi used to safely transport dark side objects from one place of the Jedi Temple to another place, whether that be for additional storage or complete destruction of the object entirely. Artifacts of the dark side and the ancient Sith were extremely important, and we have talked about some of the most dangerous artifacts many times on the channel before. Oftentimes, these artifacts held the spirits of ancient Sith, and their dark influence would warp and corrupt their surroundings or even their wielders. Force Binding completely takes away the essential function of a Sith artifact by putting the powers under bondage and keeping its area of influence limited to only the object itself. Using this power, a few Jedi could ideally even bind the evil spirits of an ancient Sith into a soul artifact, rendering it pretty much useless. We hear a lot about the dark side tainting entire areas, or even planets, or corrupting things like kyber crystals in the bleeding process. It is really interesting to hear that the Jedi art of cleansing these effects using the heal crystal method, or with this ability of Force Binding, came in great use. Of course, binding doesn't exactly cleanse the artifact, only limits its sphere of influence. However, what does actually do this cleansing function would be the next ability, the Force ability that the Sith hate more than any other, Force Light. It is a tragedy that Force Light is not something widely pursued or taught by the Jedi Order, as it could potentially be their secret weapon to defeating the Sith once and for all, if they had actually been known to use it. As the name suggests, Force Light is the pure light side ability for one that actually harnesses the Force in a pure way in order to produce a massive ball of light, typically in their hand or manifesting it somewhere else. The light itself was blinding to all who allied with the darkness, and the entire function of the ability purged the surrounding area of all darkness. It is said that this ability could temporarily sever a Sith's connection to the dark side itself, like how a Force Scream severs the connection from a Jedi to the light side. Force Light could also dispel dark illusions and cleanse people of dark mind control. Furthermore, the ability could also be used to banish Sith spirits themselves. The light essentially made the dark spirits solid to where they could be affected by physical weapons, and their connection to the dark side was significantly weaker. In this way, one could ideally defeat a Sith spirit in the physical realm so long as the Force Light ability was active. In one famous instance of the ability, Jedi Master Arca Jeth used Force Light to purge a planet of dark side energies, permitting from Freda Nad's sarcophagus. But this isn't even the most impressive application of the ability. Master Thawne managed to use both Force Light and Force Binding to purge the entire system of Umbria completely of the dark side, by trapping all of the dark side spirits that plagued the planet into one single body of water, which he named Lake Nathan. After this, the formerly desolate world began to grow lush green with flora yet again, showing the true, unbridled power of Force Light. Other practitioners of Force Light include Master Yaddle, Nomi's Sunrider, Jacen Solo, as well as Grandmaster Luke Skywalker. Luke had used Force Light when in the battle against the dark side demon known as Abeloth, the wicked creature that Luke subdued in her tentacles and would have completely killed him. However, Luke Skywalker drew upon the compassion he had for the entire galaxy, and most importantly, the love that he had for his family, friends, as well as the Jedi Praxium that he had established as the new Grand Master. All of the sudden, at the moment of his apparent death, his body was wreathed in pure light, burning and banishing the tentacles around him and driving back Abeloth, a Force ability that could combat the very might of Abeloth, the Force Demon. Another rare instance of this happening is when Jacen Solo completed oneness with the Force and was bathed in Force Light while defeating the Supreme Overlord of the Yuuzhan Vong. Earlier, Nomi's Sunrider, one of the former Grandmasters of the Jedi Order, was a master of this ability and used it to dissolve all darkside illusions from around her during the battle, and would often use Force Light in conjunction with her battle meditation, making one of the most powerful Force abilities in all of the lore. Undoubtedly, Force Light is one of the finest abilities ever produced by the Jedi, and like we said earlier, it is really a shame that this ability isn't used more widespread within the Order. But why exactly is this? The problem is that a lightsider has to be pure in their intentions and have a genuine connection with the light side in order to accomplish this feat. Unlike telekinesis, light isn't something that is easily used or mastered. While this fact helps keep the sanctity of the ability intact, I feel that this power is shamefully underutilized and could honestly be the difference maker in a battle against the forces of the dark side or the Sith. And that is why the Sith absolutely hated this power. Sith feed on darkness, and their entire doctrine revolves around the idea that the dark side is completely sovereign within the Force. Just the existence of this ability and the implications of its use flies in the face of everything that the Sith believe in and work hard to attain. Just think, a Sith with unimaginable power and strength could be reduced to nothing in an instant with a single use of this overpowering light side ability. But anyway,
welcome again, curious acolytes of the galaxy, back to the archives. We did a video recently talking about the absolutely overpowered light side ability known as Force Light and all of its insane applications. In that video, we briefly mentioned a circumstance where Luke Skywalker was able to give himself fully over to the Force, which caused his body to erupt in Force Light. This actually damaged Abeloth enough for her to let Luke go. The state was more than just a manifestation of Force Light, but rather a unique state that very few have ever achieved, something known as true oneness with the Force. This ability seemed to be the only thing that actually substantially hurt Abeloth and managed to actually kill one of her form. How insane is that? Luke isn't the only person to achieve oneness, as many from the Skywalker bloodline did also, including Jacen Solo, who would eventually become Darth Caedus, all of which we are about to discuss in today's holocron, as well as another Force ability that actually managed to damage Abeloth, although nowhere near the ability of oneness. True oneness with the Force is not just a state of mind like the Jedi claim it is. Many Jedi and Sith have surrendered themselves to the will of the Force time and time again, and entered a state of mind that allowed them to basically have their will and power right alongside that of the Force in near perfect synchronization. While this is impressive and all, what true oneness is actually a state of being that the person can achieve to where their entire physical form is temporarily transformed as they become a manifestation of the actual Force itself. Now though, let's analyze some of the most famous accounts so that we can fully understand what Force oneness actually is. The most quintessential example of this happening is when Jacen Solo became one with the Force during the conclusion of the Yuuzhan Vong War. In fact, it happened in the final battle between Jacen Solo and the leader of the Vong named Emile, who was actually the only Force sensitive that the Yuuzhan Vong had. During this battle with Emile, Jacen experienced a moment of oneness with the Force, in which he was united with its true power. He was briefly transfigured into a pure being of Force energy, achieving deeper unity with the Force than any other Jedi in history. Jacen's entire body was glowing from the inside out with a golden light. Beyond this though, something truly special happened.
During this state, he was, quote, briefly transformed into the most powerful manifestation of the Force on record. In this state of oneness, he could counter every one of Onimi's movements and neutralize his poisons. In the end, Jason was so powerful that he actually straight up melted Onimi through the power of the Force. This is what real Force oneness was like, not just a state of mind. Jason had essentially achieved this state because he had already gone around the entire galaxy, learning from every other Force organization to truly understand the Force in its entirety, taking years to even come close to this. After this had happened, Jason admitted that he didn't think that he'd ever be able to achieve this state again. Compelling though, that it took not only Jedi doctrine, but nearly all of the Force-sensitive doctrine in the entire galaxy to achieve. One of the next times we see Force oneness being manifested was of course Grand Master Luke Skywalker. Luke actually did it 3 times, once in the Yuzhong Vong War and then with Abeloth, which is the topic of today's holocron. The first time he achieved oneness was just like Jason. His body was wreathed in golden light, and not only that, but he shelled himself in golden force light that incinerated all of his enemies that were around him. He slew countless Yuzhong Vong in this state that was described as a maelstrom of luminous force energy that poured from a calm center. It was a storm in which Luke himself did not appear to be present, either physically or as an individual personality even, having completely surrendered himself to the very will of the Force. The second time was when he was exhausted after battling one of Abeloth's many bodies. Luke managed to achieve oneness with the Force and unleash enough power to destroy that image of her in one of her powerful forms. Though this time, it actually damaged Luke's body. The amount of power he had unleashed was enough to destroy some of his own cells, though luckily, he was able to heal from this afterwards. The third time is a bit debatable though. He was taken in a deadly embrace by Abeloth during their final battle and final encounter. Luke managed to manifest a powerful usage of Force Light to break free, but the fact that the Force Light completely covered his body, plus the emotions he went through in order to achieve it, makes us wonder if this was not just Force Light and not full actual oneness in the Force. The novel itself doesn't indicate that this was indeed Force oneness, but rather refers to it as just light. However, based on the description, we can't help but think that this may have been true oneness like the other 2 times. The state of being was the only thing that really managed to put an end to Abeloth and hurt her in any way that really mattered. The other Force ability we want to discuss, a dark side one that injured Abeloth, did nowhere near the damage. This was known as the Dark Net Ritual that the Sith tried and may have hampered her in a brief moment, but Abeloth was just too powerful and on a level that rendered most Force abilities to be inconveniences at best. However, only Force oneness struck her with true fear. And I theorize that Abeloth really couldn't be injured by any fully dark side ability to the level of a light side one, as of course Abeloth is a creature of the dark. So what is Force oneness truly? We believe that it is a temporary state of perfection achieved by those who have completely understood the true will and nature of the Force and have allowed it to work through them, transforming their body into nothing but a conduit for the divine power of the cosmic force. In this state, one practically wields all of the power that the Force has to offer, with only limits being how much their physical form can actually handle. Though, Luke Skywalker was cautious about using it as he admitted that the moment of power that it granted him was a slippery slope to none other than the dark side. However, it is not something that can be called upon like other Force abilities naturally, but rather is a gift that is granted when the Force deems it necessary. I believe Luke is actually just talking about the true power that it grants him and wanting to achieve that power on command later. This is why it may lead one to the dark side, not because oneness is inherently a dark side ability at all. It is actually my personal headcanon that if Anakin Skywalker had found his full potential as the Chosen One, then he would exist in a permanent state of Force oneness, able to use its full power to maintain the balance as he desired, a potential entity in the Force in his own right. But again, this is not canon by any stretch, just something that I personally have theorized. But now, Acolytes, let us know your thoughts on truly being one with the Force in the comments below. Is this what Anakin Skywalker's true potential and power in the Force may have looked like? Is Force oneness Anakin's potential? And what do you think of the only Force ability that was ever able to truly damage Abeloth? Not only this, but actually destroy one of her forms. We eagerly await your responses. Greetings yet again, acolytes of the galaxy and students of the Force, and welcome back to the channel and our archives. Just a short while ago, we posted a video talking about the creature known as the Bendu, a powerful being that claimed complete and total neutrality within the Force. We discussed his power over the Force and how he was able to manipulate it in the way that he did, unlike any Jedi or Sith before him. A few of you in our comment section raised your hands in question and posted a rather interesting one. Could the Bendu kill Abeloth, one of the many mystical titans of Star Wars lore? Abeloth made herself notorious in legends after she rose once more to terrorize the galaxy, only being defeated by Grandmaster Luke Skywalker at his most powerful, coupled with the combined might of the Sith and Darth Krayt. In the novel, Abeloth is beaten back by Luke, but not killed. We've gone over the power of Abeloth time and time again, so now we want to ask a different question. Following her defeat, Abeloth again is not killed, but only returns herself to a slumber for yet another several millennia. Her control over the Force is unlike most any other beings, and she managed to take the spot as one of the most powerful beings in all of Star Wars lore, eclipsing the might of any Jedi or Sith that came before or after her as a Force entity. The short answer is no. The Bendu could not kill Abeloth, and it is highly debatable whether she even can be killed or not. But why is this? What makes Abeloth so powerful? And the only thing keeping her down is her imprisonment by the combined might of the ones of Mortis, the Jedi, and the Sith. Well, stick with us today, curious acolytes of the Force, as we open another holocron and measure just how powerful Abeloth really is and was, and explain why she cannot be killed. The secrets to Abeloth's power lie in her backstory. This video is not about her backstory though, as we have done a full video and explanation on Abeloth before, so I will summarize her story as best as possible. According to the legend told by the Killik people, Abeloth originally started as someone simply known as the Servant, with her real name being lost to time. The Servant had somehow landed on the original tropical planet of the Ones of Mortis. This was nearly 100,000 years ago, so this was before the Ones had even found Mortis. Long story short, the Servant became a part of this family and the Ones, and she essentially took the place as the Mother. The Mother keeping the son and daughter in line and directing their energies other places that would be more constructive, rather than the daughter who was the light and the son who was the dark constantly fighting with one another. The Mother, or the Servant, was the absolute greatest thing that ever happened to the Ones of Mortis, creating peace where the Father could not. However, this peace only lasted for so long, as it quickly became apparent that the Servant was aging, and was still very much mortal. The Servant, or the Mother, loved them as children, but was not like them. Fearful that her family would abandon her, she went to two places that would secure her ultimate power and immortality: the Font of Power and the Pool of Knowledge. These places were nexuses of Force energy rich in the dark and light sides of the Force respectively. Long ago, the son had attained his power by drinking from the Font of Power, taking in all the richness of the dark side of the Force. And at the same time, the daughter bathed in the Pool of Knowledge, which granted her the richness of the light side. Desperate to remain with her new family, the Mother did both of these things, only to a tragic result. The Font of Power granted the Mother limitless power of all of the past and future, and the Pool of Knowledge did the same, but for knowledge and intelligences, again granting her the knowledge of all the past and the future. Because the Mother was mortal though, and not of the same race as the One, this process had unintended side effects. She became a mutated monster, consumed by darkness, and an imbalance of the Force, caught between light and dark, transforming into a being of eldritch nightmares. The Mother attempted to use her powers to enslave her family and force them to kneel before her ultimate power. But the Father was disgusted and took his children away, leaving the Mother all alone on this tropical world, twisted and corrupted eternally by the powers that were not meant to be hers. This created the being known as Abeloth, as the Mother disintegrated into nothingness, a brand new creature, a creature of near limitless power. This officially drove her to madness. The Ones then employed the help of the Krillix to build a center point station, and would encase their original homeworld in a shell of black holes known as the Maw, in the very center of the deep core of the galaxy, in order to contain her might. Abeloth would actually escape the Maw every so often though, whenever the flow of time and the Force was altered. Abeloth thrived on fear and doom, fanning the flames of conflict every time that she escaped, and sending the galaxy into chaos and turmoil. Each time Abeloth escaped, the son and daughter would return to the Krillix and defeat Abeloth, locking her back within her eternal prison. This cycle would repeat itself hundreds of thousands of years until the death of the ones during the era of the Clone War, marking a substantial change. Abeloth would escape again during the era of Luke Skywalker, and although Luke beat her back and made it seem as though she was dead, she was not truly ever gone. Luke himself admitted that no being of the Force could ever be killed truly, and he estimated that Abeloth one day would return, possibly in 100 or 1,000 years. His contingency plan for Abeloth was to find the Mortis dagger and keep it with the Jedi for many generations to come as a way to possibly kill this Force deity, since the dagger successfully killed the ones of Mortis during the Clone Wars so many years ago. Though I think it is important to mention that Luke only theorized that the dagger would be able to kill Abeloth, but this was never actually a proven fact. Abeloth eclipses the power of even the ones. The reason Abeloth is so incredibly powerful is because unlike the son and the daughter who only drank or bathed in one of these nexuses, Abeloth did both, attaining all knowledge and power of past and future, which she used to great and terrible effect. Abeloth had many strange and incredibly powerful abilities with hardly any restriction on any of them. The power of the dark side Force Nexus, combined with the knowledge of how to use it from the light side Nexus, made her almost completely unstoppable. This was a being so powerful that her mere presence threw the galaxy into turmoil, and her power levels in the Force were beyond planetary level, eclipsing even Luke Skywalker, the son of the Chosen One. It is safe to say that with all of this, Abeloth probably knew and had mastered every Force ability known to the galaxy, except of course the elusive power of Force Light, which required one to be pure of heart and firmly rooted in the light side. Beyond this sole ability though, Abeloth had better force healing than anything Luke had ever seen before, and even after she was thought to be completely destroyed, one wriggling tentacle was all it took for Luke to know that she would never be truly gone or defeated. Abeloth is possibly the most powerful dark side affiliated being in all of Star Wars, and until the time where the Mortis dagger is found and tested on Abeloth, we can't be too certain that she isn't completely immortal. Well friends, and students of the Force, I hope you enjoyed this holocron opening and video breakdown, and hopefully we answered some questions for you. I find these incredibly powerful Force beings so very interesting, and I fully intend on talking more about them in the future. So if you're interested, students of the Force and acolytes of the galaxy, back to our archive. We've been expecting you. Previously, we produced a video about Abeloth the Mother, the accursed Star Wars entity that was born from the Ones, but not quite the Ones. The mother who was once very much mortal and human, but who drank from the font of power and bathed in the pool of knowledge, inheriting both the ultimate power of the dark side that the son possessed and the ultimate knowledge of the light that the daughter wielded. In that video, we theorized that there was only a single way to defeat this terrifying dark side entity, that being the dagger of Mortis, the same dagger that killed so many of the ones, including the likes of the father. In that video, we speculated that the dagger was the only means in which Abeloth could be eternally vanquished, and even this was mere speculation. We even theorized that the dagger could hypothetically fail. However, Grandmaster Luke Skywalker made it one of the primary missions of the Jedi Order to retrieve and locate this dagger, in an attempt that they would have it in the wings the moment when Abeloth reared her ugly tentacles yet again. In the comments of that video, however, there began an interesting discussion. What about the might of the Chosen One in Anakin Skywalker? But not just any version of Anakin Skywalker. Could a full realized potential of the Chosen One himself rival the might of Abeloth? Could a full potential Anakin Skywalker destroy Abeloth the Accursed? And if so, or if not, why? Well, acolytes of the galaxy and students in the Force, today we will analyze and answer that question, and answer this pressing idea that was posed. Could a full potential Anakin Skywalker, the realized power of the Chosen One himself, contend and destroy Abeloth? To begin, we have to go back to the Clone Wars and the basis of this argument. In Star Wars The Clone Wars, it is revealed that it is the father that brings Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ahsoka, and Anakin to the world of Mortis, in an attempt to confirm that Anakin is in fact the prophesied Chosen Chosen One. The father does this as he senses himself becoming old and tired of his job of maintaining balance between the light and the dark in his son and daughter. It is because of this that he believes that the power of the Chosen One, while on the world of Mortis, may be enough to subdue the godlike power of the son and the daughter combined. A theory that is ultimately proven correct when Anakin Skywalker, using the energies of the world and tapping into his full potential, is able to bring both the daughter and the son to the ground, not only confirming the fact that he is capable of harnessing both of their power, but that he is also the Chosen One of prophecy. This is the moment in the explanation that many fans point to when they point to a full potential Anakin Skywalker being able to defeat Abeloth. But before we outright answer that, let's look at Abeloth, who too had a very similar feat, bringing both the son and the daughter to their knees. Abeloth did what she did in order to stay with her children, but it's when her children rejected her, and they realized the monster that their mother had become, therefore forcing the son and the daughter to bow before her now ultimate power. Essentially what I'm getting at here is Abeloth achieved the exact same feat that Anakin Skywalker did on Mortis. However, there are a few key differences. It is speculated that although the ones can be killed, that Abeloth herself is eternal, as even Luke himself speculates and theorizes that Abeloth is an eternal entity now, and that she officially cannot be killed, only subdued for several millennia into her eventual return. There are also comments by Luke Skywalker that I would like to discuss. On one occasion, Grandmaster Luke Skywalker stated that he assumed and theorized that Abeloth's power was nearly 12 times his own natural connection to the Force. While Anakin and Luke Skywalker are the absolute greatest potential that a mortal can achieve and a non-deity can achieve through the Force, Abeloth is an entirely different creature. In Legends continuity, as stated by George Lucas, Luke Skywalker inherited the power of the Chosen One and his father in Anakin. But more than this, Luke represents the ultimate potential that Anakin failed to achieve. So when Grandmaster Luke Skywalker states that he believes that Abeloth is 12 times as powerful as himself, that says something, and it roughly indicates that Abeloth is 12 times the ultimate potential of Anakin Skywalker. But then again, many fans point back to Mortis and Anakin's ability to subdue both the daughter as well as the son. Well, there's some important things here as well. It is indicated and stated by the father directly that it is because of the planet of Mortis that Anakin grows so powerful. He's literally drawing the Force energy from the world of Mortis itself in order to subdue the ones. Therefore, if we wanted to speculate, the full power of Anakin Skywalker on Mortis could actually or may be able to contend with Abeloth. But anywhere else in the Star Wars galaxy, and I believe that Abeloth would actually defeat Anakin quite handily. Even a full potential Anakin, Luke Skywalker needed the help of one of the greatest Sith Lords that had ever lived in Darth Krayt, as well as his small army of Sith, as well as several other Jedi. And again, they didn't even kill Abeloth, they simply enchained her one more time. In the Star Wars Legend novel that debuted the power of Abeloth, it is stated that the father had to do everything in his power in order to stop Abeloth from outright killing the son and daughter. And that again, the father didn't actually beat Abeloth away, but rather stunned her, as it is heavily believed that Abeloth has more power than all of the ones of Mortis combined and is in fact immortal. In addition to this, the version of Abeloth that Luke Skywalker comes into direct battle with is an avatar of hers which is stated to not be her final or most powerful form. And again, that a full potential Abeloth was roughly 12 times as powerful as Luke himself. There is now a passage in the novel that I would like to read from. Ben recalled the giant volcano at Abeloth's home in the Maw, and the pool of magma on the Padir, and quickly understood the truth of what Vestra was stating. Whether the volcano somehow fed Abeloth's power, or were a mere side effect, it seemed clear that they were associated with her presence. And on Coruscant, even a small flow of magma would kill millions. With footings and foundations melting by the square kilometer, sky towers would fall by the thousands, tumbling into their neighbors, or dissolving into the same pool of molten stone that had eaten away their bases. The fumes, superheated and filled with noxious gas, would kill hundreds of millions, and if a pyroclastic flow developed, the death toll would rise to the billions. And the whole time, Abeloth would be feeding off of the fear and anguish of the victims. She would grow into a being beyond mortal comprehension. With the dark side hers to command, she could literally reshape the galaxy in any manner she wished. When looking at the character of Abeloth, she very much represents the rising tension of the Star Wars universe. At this point in time, Grandmaster Luke Skywalker has defeated Darth Sidious twice, including an ultimate form of Darth Sidious, which was capable of destroying entire worlds. Therefore, they have to rise the tension even higher. higher, creating this sort of ancient force entity for him to combat. Therefore, it makes sense why Abeloth would be able to take out the likes of Anakin Skywalker, as she represents this huge, final, massive threat to a Grandmaster Luke Skywalker who has already achieved the potential of his father, and a character who is massively powerful. But again, according to this same character, Abeloth has 12 times his natural potential. This is of course not to say that a full potential Anakin Skywalker is weak whatsoever. As George Lucas has stated, a full potential Anakin Skywalker would be the most powerful Jedi or Sith to ever exist in Star Wars lore. Abeloth is not a Jedi or a Sith. She represents a literal extension of the dark side itself, and is the embodiment of two fully powered force nexuses, one light and one dark. And as we've stated in previous videos, the dark side gave her all of the power in the world or in the galaxy, and the light side gave her the knowledge in order to wield it. But again, my friends, this is simply my interpretation of these ancient writings. But now I would curious acolytes, back to our archives. We've been expecting you. The ancient Sith purebloods were known to have been a primal race that adhered only to strength and power alone. Their involvement to the dark side became a generational trend that would continue into their bloodlines and family like a deep-seating poison until their entire culture was nothing but pure darkness. Each of their rules were chosen on a basis of strength in the Force and the kind of might they showed over their people. However, there was another way that these primordial purebloods believed that their kings were chosen. You see, ancient Sith had a pantheon of gods that they worshipped, those that they believed gave them great power and could even be reborn in the flesh to come and rule over them. The ancient Sith believed that King Adis might have been one of these fabled gods, and thus dubbed him the Sith Ari. One of the most important gods in their pantheon, however, is one which has been known as the left-handed god. He is extremely powerful in the Sith folklore, so much so that they believed that Ajunta Pal was the reborn manifestation of the left-handed god. However, in our research into the forbidden pages of the Supernatural Encounters novel, we have reason to believe that the left-handed god is actually more than just a myth. This information is extremely interesting, as we are finally getting into the really deep lore of the Star Wars galaxy. The mysteries are becoming more clear, and so we must delve in and open up another Sith holocron. First though, we are having a big sale on the Star Wars merch page in anticipation for Black Friday. So, if you're interested in getting Star Wars merchandise for yourself or someone else, now is the time to do it, as there are big sales, and if you use code WAVE at checkout, you can get 15% off your entire order. Now my friends and acolytes, take a seat, grab a snack, and let us begin. The left-handed god was known by many names, such as Pomgema, Typhogem, and later, the Father of Shadows. Typhogem was a very important deity to the ancient Sith, and he was the main god that was worshipped by the Kasai. The Kasai, who were basically the priests of the Sith pureblood caste system. It was the Kasai who beheld Ajunta Pal's great power in the Force and decided that he was the second coming of their left-handed god. Information on this being is extremely scarce. However, we get a lot of activity from Typhogem in the pages of Supernatural Encounters. We plan to release a video at some point going over the novel of Supernatural Encounters and all that it has held, but for today, we wanted to give you all a sampling of what absolutely wild things are contained within these forbidden pages. Today's topic will be on such a being. Supernatural Encounters tells us that Typhogem is more than just folklore and is actually the offspring of two of the Bedlam spirits. The Bedlam spirits, if you remember, are a few that have ultimate power over life, matter, time, and reality itself. Some of the most powerful, if not absolutely the most powerful beings in all of the lore that have ever appeared. They are able to manipulate all of these aspects of reality and shape it as they please with little to no regard for the wider galaxy. Typhogem, or the Sith god, is the offspring of Tilotny and Dandasine. However, Tilotny despised her son, for she did not see him as beautiful and wanted to destroy him. In his rage, Typhogem took his anger out on humans, since they closely resembled the shape that his cruel mother took. The only image of the left-handed god that we can get is a stone idol sculpted in his image, which makes him appear to be eldritch, and a Cthulhu-like being with a humanoid body and a tentacle-ridden head. As far as powers go, we know that he is a godlike being just barely under the powers of the Bedlam spirits themselves. He could wield the Force in all of reality like no other, as he showed the power to completely drain someone of all of their blood, leaving them just a shriveled husk of flesh. He commanded shadow servants to do his will, and inspired several dark side cults around the galaxy to dominate humans in his hatred. On other planets, specifically Mimban, he was known by the name of Pomogema and would grant healing abilities to his followers and priests, as well as give them powers to do miraculous and terrible things. Our guess is that Typhogem probably had the power to grant force sensitivity in all of his subjects. In one of his greatest shows of strength, he actually killed Whitesand, the force demon that had killed the Five. He was hell-bent on the destruction and domination of the entire galaxy, and wanted to spread his shadowy influence on all corners of every planet. And it is believed that he may have been the origins of the very Sith race. His main goal was to get revenge on his mother and the Bedlam spirits. However, it would be unfruitful, as he was simply not powerful enough to destroy them. The Father of Shadows would ultimately meet his end at the hands of the Bedlam spirit known as Horless, and his final moments were very dramatic. Here is a passage from Supernatural Encounters that explains the entire ordeal and the final death of this Sith god. Typhogem would neither flee nor give in to the forces tearing at him, but instead, he strove towards Horless intent on his destruction. Yet his body was not as strong as his will, and it began to pull apart his membranes, wings, and limbs. At last, he let out a final, agonizing wail that shattered the neighboring moons. Typhogem's body splintered into pieces, which stiffened into petrification before being sucked into a null inversion, where parts of him were hurled in odd regions of the galaxy, never to be found. What an ending for this character. The powers of Typhogem were such that just his voice crying out in a final agony was enough to destroy several moons at once. From the information collected here, we can safely say that Typhogem, or the Father of Shadows, supersedes the powers of the Ones, and most likely even surpasses that of Abeloth, as the Bedlam spirits, beings that are most of the time content with not being involved in galactic affairs whatsoever, deemed him a threat enough to destroy him. Again, I want to make it clear that in the very deep reaches of Star Wars lore, the Bedlam spirits adhere to powers that even the Force cannot attain. Typhogem's strength is on a completely separate metric than that of any other powerful being that we have encountered thus far on the channel, besides of course the Bedlam spirits themselves, and perhaps even the full united power of the Force, that being all life in the Star Wars galaxy at once. Our information on Typhogem is limited, and ever expanding as we uncover more understanding about him in the pages of Supernatural Encounters. I personally am so excited that there's more lore concerning the Bedlam spirits and the Five beyond just that single, very strange comic that they appeared in. These incredibly powerful beings and entities show us that the Force is four-dimensional and has a lot more to do on the cosmic scale of things than we initially thought. We plan to continue diving into the pages of Supernatural Encounters to learn more about these entities and more about these historically powerful beings that lie within. And this video is only the first of many that we will be doing while discussing such beings as Typhogem. So, if you want more on these entities, please be sure to like and share this video. My friends, if you enjoy this kind of video where we really dive into the strange and esoteric beings of the galaxy, be sure to let us know down below other subjects and characters that you would like to see discussed and analyzed in our archives. As always, my friends, until next time, may the Force be with you, and I hope that you are having a great day.